Slides to go through. Hopefully we can make it. Cosmological argument. When Thomists employ this argument, or indeed anything from Summa Theologia, they tend to insist on potentially wrapping their actual being of an argument in potential actualization for mysterious actual potential, but we ain't going to do this because we are Anglais. Capiche? Here it is in a nutshell. Premise 1. Everything that exists has a cause. Premise 2. The universe exists. Conclusion. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Proponents defend the first premise via inductive reasoning. They say, look, every existing thing we know of has a cause, and so we can assume that probably all existing things have a cause. They dress this up in Bayesian language normally as well. That's becoming quite popular in apologetic circles. So how do we respond to this? There's so many ways. Here's one. We can just point out that this is a black swan fallacy. For millennia, it was universally accepted that all swans are white. In fact, this truth was so incontrovertible that logicians would often use it to illustrate the process of deductive reasoning. Yes, all existing things seem to have a cause, but maybe in certain conditions there's a black swan. There's existing things that don't have causes. Maybe. But fair enough, the intuition is still pretty strong, so we try a different objection. What about this? We could say, no, everything that exists has an explanation, but not necessarily a cause. A cause is a very specific type of explanation. If I had 12 apples and I wanted to hand out one apple to every single person that was in that crowd, I couldn't do it because there was more than 12. Thus, the explanation obviously had nothing to do with causation at all. Likewise, if we asked, why is there something rather than nothing, the big Leibniz question, and we answered it by saying that it's because nothing is a human abstract, and thus it's not possible, then we have an explanation for existing things that is not a cause. Or we can do this. This is one of my favorite ways to approach it. We could just bite the bullet and say, fair enough. But what this means is that God, being an existing thing, has a cause. Just follows. To which theists respond, no, God is special. The problem, however, is that any reason they give for God's speciality can be applied with fewer assumptions and fewer ontological commitments to the universe itself. For instance, if they say that God is unlimited in power, we can say that the universe is unlimited in power. If they say that God is necessary, we can say that the universe is necessary, and again, with fewer ontological commitments. Hence, their special pleading for God. They're asserting that God is an exception to a rule without adequate justification. Now,
okay, there's a lot there. So I'll turn to you, Jono. I do want to say first, thank you so much, Apologetics Channels, for the super chat. So grateful for that. Really appreciate you. But Jono, where do you want to take this?
Well, I think it's easy to defeat an argument when you just make up an argument that the people who disagree with you don't actually defend. So he has his 3-step argument, but where does that come from? It doesn't come from Thomas like he said it did. It just seems like maybe there's some internet apologists who have a sloppily formed cosmological argument that everything has a cause, but that's just not what they've said. So if you look at Thomas, this is his second way, his argument from efficient causes. He starts it off with, in the world of sense, we find there is an order of efficient causes. So that's his causal principle, that there are chains of causes. Nowhere does Thomas say everything which exists has a cause. And I think that Stephen knows that. Not to kind of attribute bad intentions to him, but he is pretty much preaching to the choir. When he was at an atheist conference, he has a room full of people who already agree with him. It's kind of easy to just make your opponents look silly. Yeah, he has gotten way better in the last the last year or so than maybe his videos he made 10 years ago, 5 years ago. But I do expect better than him to say that theists believe everything has a cause.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. No, because I was really surprised with that, and I was wondering, because he kind of treated it like a Thomistic argument was how he was talking, but then it wasn't it wasn't argued like a Thomistic argument. The second premise was the idea of I guess the universe exists, but it just I was a little surprised because it seemed like it just wasn't very I don't know. I actually can't recall any theists recently that are higher level or even medium presenting this kind of argument. Because I feel like everyone knows that if you say everything exists as a cause, then it's what caused God? And if that's your first premise, then that's a fair question. So that's why you've reformulated to the Kalam version at least. So
yeah. So you just said no theist recently. I'd go further. No theist in history. Maybe there's been a few examples, but there's never been a strong tradition of saying everything has a cause, the universe, therefore God. I'd like to see where this argument actually comes from.
And I'm sure there's people online. I made the mistake of I remember I made this presentation once and I accidentally put everything that exists as a cause, and so I'm sure you can find videos, but I think I agree with you in terms of serious rigorous arguments. I don't think anyone's ever raised that. We could talk about, so you talked about the black swan fallacy with regards to the causal principle, but I just wonder is this actually the case where it's bad to conclude that say everything that exists as a cause, or another version of the PSR, because it's not just a particular set of facts from one person's experience. this is what like most people intuitively believe. Like not everyone would accept like a PSR, but most people would accept it, and like intuitively would believe it. So I just don't see why it's a fallacy.
Yeah. So he said that people tend to, this is his exact words, dress that up in Bayesian language. He kind of implies that using Bayesian reasoning is a bad thing, and they're like being cheeky.
Yeah.
These Christians like applying sophisticated methods in philosophy and epistemology of science. Like that's not a bad thing if the Christians are making Bayesian arguments. Like that's, you should be like impressed with that and encouraging them. So
yeah.
And then I think there's a greater point to make about there's a certain kind of internet atheist who just loves to say fallacy this, fallacy that. It's just like memorize 1,000 fallacies and just regurgitate them instead of actually engaging. But I'm not trying to be too mean. I did overall enjoy the video, and Stephen has done good stuff recently. But
yeah,
maybe I'm just in a bad mood.
Yeah. I mean, it is early down and under in Australia, so maybe you're just cranky. I don't know. Finish your tea or coffee or whatever you're drinking. But like, no, I think I agree with you. And then the only other thing I remember with this kind of clip is he talks about this idea of like naturalism just beating theism, and I thought he was going to go the Oppie route, but then like he kind of didn't, because then he talked about like, well, if they say like God is unlimited in power, we could say the universe is unlimited in power. And he just kind of asserts it. And I'm just like, what does that even mean? For the universe, like, so the universe could create, like, violate the laws of conservation of energy. Could the universe just like create like a bunch of other universes, like ex nihilo? I was just kind of confused. Like, does like the universe have like intentionality behind it? Like, I just wasn't really sure what he was getting at there, because I don't think that's true. Maybe you can make like Oppie's kind of like version of the argument, but like, with regards to like saying the universe could be like unlimited in power, that just didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so I would usually, if someone asked me to defend naturalism, talk about how it's simpler. You just have one physical system which creates universe. It beats God in the priors battle. But yeah, I think his way of describing that was strange.